23 years, I wore a name badge that said manager. And for 30, I read other people's most important papers across a counter. The most important one I ever read came through my own letterbox while I was lying in a hospital bed. My son filed it. A power of attorney over me. When I rang him, he said he was only trying to help. I sat down at my own kitchen table in the cold and started taking it apart, one line at a time. If you found this channel today, welcome. And to the women who come back, who sit with me of an evening and know exactly what a letter like that does to a person, thank you for keeping the chair beside me warm. Stay with me, follow along, and let's see this one through together. The hall was cold in a way a house only gets when it's been shut up. 10 days of hospital warmth, of that dry heat they pump through the wards, and then Val's car, and then this. My own front door, and behind it, air that smelled of nobody. A kettle gone cold, and bins not put out, and the particular staleness of carpet that's had no feet on it. I stood on the mat with my stick and let the door swing shut behind me. I am home, I thought, and I felt almost nothing at all. That should have told me something. A woman who feels nothing coming through her own front door is a woman whose body knows before her mind does. Val had wanted to stay. She'd fussed the whole way from the hospital, my younger sister, 68 and driving like the road had personally offended her, the wing mirror cracked and the whole car smelling of that daft spaniel of hers. "I'll do you a bit of tea, Madge," she'd said, half out of her seatbelt before we'd even stopped. "I'm not leaving you to rattle round on your own the first night." "You will leave me," I'd said. "I've had 10 days of people doing things round me. I want my own kettle and my own quiet." She'd looked at me a long moment, too long. Then she'd squeezed my hand the way she does, hard enough to leave a mark, and said, "You ring me, I mean it, any hour of the night." And she'd gone. I'd watched her taillights swing out of Lindley Road, and I'd been glad. God forgive me, I'd been glad to be rid of the kindness for an evening. The post was on the mat. There was a fair heap of it, the way there is after you've been away. I straightened the mat with my foot first, nudged it square against the skirting, because that's a thing I've always done, and a new hip wasn't going to stop me. You can take the woman off the branch floor, but you don't take the branch floor out of the woman. Then I bent for the post, slow, one hand on the radiator, and carried it through to the kitchen and put it under the lamp. It was already dark out. Dark by 4:30 now, this time of year. And there'd been a frost that morning, the first proper one, white along the porch rail when Val brought me in. I'd been home by the first week of November, the autumn of 2025, and I was 73, and I'd just learned to walk again with a stick. Get well cards mostly. A nice one from the ladies at the church, all their names crammed in round the edges. A reminder about a dental appointment I'd gone and missed. A catalog I never asked for. And then, near the bottom, a long white envelope with a window in it, and through the window, the name of my building society. I'd banked with them 40 years. I'd worked for them for 30. I could have told you the weight of that paper with my eyes shut, the particular stiffness of it, because I'd signed off 10,000 letters on exactly that stock. I opened it standing up. The lino was cold through my slippers, the thin ones, and I remember thinking I must dig out the proper ones, and then I stopped thinking about slippers altogether. It was a confirmation. That's all those letters ever are. We are writing to confirm the recent change to the authorized signatory on the account ending in the following digits. And then a few lines of the careful, bloodless language I'd written and read and explained across a counter for half my working life. Please find enclosed. If you did not request this change, our lines are open Monday to Friday. I read the words, "Change to the authorized signatory," and 30 years stood up inside me all at once. I knew what it meant. There is no muddle in language like that. It does not mean a mistake. It does not mean a system glitch. It means a person sat down with forms and put another name where mine had stood alone. I read it again. I read it a third time. The kitchen had gone very quiet, except that through the party wall I could hear next door's radio, something bright and cheerful, a phone-in, a man laughing at his own joke. The kettle sat there in front of me. I'd come home wanting nothing in the world but to fill the kettle, and now my hand wouldn't go to it. There was only one name it could be. We are not a big family, the Ellisons. There was Gerald, and Gerald has been gone 4 years now. And there is Dennis, my son, my only child. I got my phone out and I rang him. My hands were steady. I noticed that they were steady, the way you notice a thing from a little distance, as if my hands belonged to a calmer woman standing just beside me. He answered on the second ring. He'd been waiting, though I didn't think that then. "Mom, you're home. How are you feeling? Did Val get you back all right?" "Dennis," I said, "I've a letter here from the building society." A pause, just a breath of one. When you've spent your life listening to people tell you things across a counter, you learn what a pause weighs. "Right," he said. "Yes, look, Mom, I was going to talk to you about all that properly, once you were settled. I didn't want to land it on you in hospital. You weren't well enough." "It says the signatory's been changed." "It's just a precaution." His voice had gone smooth. Smooth the way a thing is smooth when it's been gone over and over in someone's head before it's said aloud. "Honestly, Mom, it's nothing for you to worry about. With everything that's happened, the fall, the operation, Carol and I just thought, while you're getting back on your feet, it makes sense for someone to be able to keep an eye on things. Pay a bill if you can't get out, that sort of thing. No one's saying you can't cope." No one's saying you can't cope. I turned that one over in my hand like a coin. Nobody says a thing like that unless somebody's been saying it. I thought about the last time they'd come, the week before I fell. Carol at this very table with her silver laptop open, and how she'd closed it, click, a shade too quick when I came in with the biscuit tin. "Just doing the family admin, Marjorie." I thought about Dennis on his knees in my hall the day after my pre-op appointment, sorting my post into neat little piles on the carpet. "Bills here, Mum. Cards here. Anything official I'll take and deal with so you don't have to fret over it." And how he'd slid one pile into his bag and zipped it shut. "Dennis," I said, "there's a phrase on this letter, lasting power of attorney. It says it's been registered." The silence this time was longer. "We're only trying to protect you, Mum," he said. "That's all this is." And I said nothing at all. I let it sit there between us, that little phrase, the one I'd hear 100 more times before this was done. I looked across my own kitchen at the windowsill, at the small china dish where, since the day of Gerald's funeral, a little gold pin had sat gathering dust. A pin they gave me for 30 years' service, one I'd never once worn since. "Dennis," I said at last, and my voice was very mild. "What date did you sign it?" The letter lay on the kitchen table, squared to the edge the way I square everything. and I sat in front of it under the one lamp and did not move for a long while. Then I got up and went to the spare room, and I brought down Gerald's box. It was on the top shelf of the wardrobe, where it had been since the funeral. A gray metal index card box, the kind they don't make anymore, with a little lever lid and a smell when you open it of cold metal and machine oil and old paper. He'd had it the whole of our marriage. 50 years that box had been filling up, card by card, in his small, upright hand. I carried it to the kitchen and set it down beside the letter and lifted the lid, and there he was. Not the man, but the way of him. Everything filed, everything dated top right in pencil. House, car, insurance, pension. A card for the boiler service going back to a boiler we'd scrapped in 1990-something. "Keep your own copy, Marjorie," I could hear him saying it. We were young. This was a kitchen table 3 houses ago, and I'd just started at the branch. A girl, really, 22 and proud of my drawer of forms. Gerald was a quantity surveyor, careful with a pencil and careful with his words, and he'd watched me one evening filling things in and signing them and handing them back, and he'd said it then. "Keep your own copy of everything. Banks keep theirs, solicitors keep theirs, you keep yours." "Why?" I'd said, "when they've got it on file." And he'd given me that dry look of his, the one that wasn't unkind, just sure. Because one day a document won't be about somebody else. One day it'll be about you. And you can read a document 100 times, Marjorie, but you only understand it the day it's about you. I hadn't understood him then. I'd thought it was just Gerald being Gerald, the careful man with his cards. I filed it away with all his other sayings about checking the tires and never trusting a builder's first quote. I understood him now. The boiler ticked under the window. Somewhere down the road, faint and thin and far too early in the year, someone's children were practicing carols, the same line of one over and over, sweet and a little flat. I sat with the box open and made myself think it through properly, the way I'd have thought through a case across the counter, not the way a frightened mother thinks. A lasting power of attorney. I knew how they worked. I'd witnessed enough of them for customers in my time. You fill in the forms, the donor and the attorney both, and you need what they call a certificate provider, someone who signs to say the donor understands what they're doing and isn't being pressured. Then it goes off to the Office of the Public Guardian to be registered, and there's a waiting period built in, weeks of it, where notice is supposed to be given to the people who matter, so anyone can object before the thing has teeth. Notice. There's the word. Notice is supposed to be given. And where had I been these last weeks while notice was being given? Flat on a ward with a pin through my hip and a drip in my arm and a head full of whatever they had me on. And before that, the run-up, the pre-op, the worry. Dennis so good about it all. Dennis collecting my post off the mat so I wouldn't have to bend. Dennis sorting it into piles on the carpet and zipping one into his bag. Anything official I'll take and deal with. I sat very still. The tea I'd finally made had gone cold at my elbow without my touching it. Here is a thing about me that I am not proud of, and I'll say it because this is the kind of place where a woman can say a true thing. For 30 years I handled money all day long. Other people's money, sums that would frighten you, and I never put a foot wrong. And then I came home each evening and let Gerald see to ours. Not because he made me. Because that was how it was done, in my mother's house and in mine. The man saw to the money, and the woman saw to everything else. And I was so tired of figures by 6 o'clock that I was glad to hand it over. I knew more about banking than any man in my street, And I let myself be the woman who didn't look at the bank statements at home. I'd taught Dennis that, without meaning to. I'd taught him that Mum was clever at the counter and helpless at the kitchen table. He'd grown up watching his father file the papers and his mother make the supper, and somewhere along the way my own son had decided which of those two people I really was. The thought of him made me want to get up that minute, find my keys, get in the car I hadn't driven since the fall, and drive the 35 miles to Calderton and stand on his step and ask him to his face what he thought he was doing. My coat was on the hook. I could feel the want of it in my hands. I didn't. I sat back down. Not because I was afraid, though I was. Because the moment I drove out there shouting, I became exactly the woman they needed me to be. The confused old mother, overwrought, not coping, you see what we mean, this is why we stepped in. I'd watched families do that to each other across the counter for 30 years. I knew how that scene ended, and it never ended with the old woman winning. No, not this time. If I was going to do this, I'd do it the way Gerald did things. Quietly. On paper. I tore a fresh page off the pad and dated it top right in the corner, the way I dated every working page of my life, the way you do when you might one day need to prove when you knew a thing. Then I started a list. Every account I held. The savings account, the big one, the $94,000 that was Gerald's life insurance and the two of us putting by for 40 years. The current account, the little premium bonds. Anything with my name on it anywhere. And looking at the list, I saw what I'd have told any customer who sat across from me in a state. You cannot fight what you cannot see. I needed the statements, all of them, which meant the branch. I reached to the bottom of the box to put Gerald's cards back straight, and my fingers met something underneath them. Not a card. A folded sheet, soft at the creases from age, pushed flat under the whole tray of them where I'd have never thought to look. I drew it out and opened it under the lamp, and it was Gerald's hand, and it was about the savings account, and I had forgotten it existed for 19 years. The branch was warm and hushed the way it always is, that particular hush of carpet and money and people speaking low. And there was a small cue, and the floor squeaked under my good shoes. I knew that squeak. Different shoes, different floor, but I'd made that same sound walking this same kind of room for 30 years. Val had driven me. She'd dropped me at the door and gone to find a parking space, grumbling, the spaniel's nose smearing the back window, the cracked wing mirror catching the gray morning. "I'll be right out here, Madge," she'd said. "You shout if you need me." She thought I was coming in to sort out a muddle. I hadn't told her yet what kind of muddle. In my coat pocket, small and hard against my fingers, was the gold pin. I'd nearly left it in its dish that morning. Then I'd picked it out, I couldn't have told you why, and slipped it in my pocket and carried it in with me like a thing you hold to steady your hand. The young man at the desk was perhaps 25. Bright, polished, a lanyard, a smile he gave everyone. He pulled the chair out for me a touch too carefully. "Now then," he said, "what can we do for you today? Did you manage to get here all right?" "I'd like a full transaction history on this account," I said, and gave him the number from memory. "Going back 6 months. Printed, please, not emailed. And I'd like to see the record of the recent signatory change while I'm here." His pen stopped its little squeaking on the pad. "Right, lovely. Is there a particular concern, or shall I just—" "There's a particular concern." I kept my voice even and pleasant. "A signatory was added to this account while I was in hospital. I'm the account holder. I'm entitled to the full history and to the documentation of that change, and I'd like it today, please, while I wait." Something shifted in his face. The brightness stayed, but it stopped being the brightness you give an old deer who's wandered in confused, and became the brightness you give someone who knows the name of the thing they're asking for. I'd seen that shift from the other side 10,000 times. It is a small pleasure I will not pretend I didn't feel. "Of course," he said. "Let me just print that off for you." While the machine warmed up, I sucked a peppermint to settle my mouth, which had gone dry, and I watched the square through the window. They were up ladders over the market, stringing the Christmas lights between the lamp posts, not lit yet, just dark loops of them against a white sky. He came back with a warm stack of paper, the toner smell still on it. "There you go. The signatory change is flagged on the 3rd page. You'll see it there. And then the transactions follow. If anything doesn't look right, our fraud team are the people to—" "Thank you," I said. "I know who they are." I took the pages to the little side counter by the leaflets, the laminated one, and I did what I always do. I folded each sheet into precise thirds before I read it, the way you fold the thing you're about to file, the crease run flat with the side of my thumb. A child somewhere behind me in the queue was laughing at something, a lovely gurgling laugh, on, and the radio they keep low at the counter was playing something with bells in it. Page 3. The signatory change, dated, the second name added in plain black type. I'd known it would be there. Seeing it was still like a small, cold hand on the back of my neck. Then the transactions. For most of the 6 months, they were exactly what they should be. My pension in, the standing orders out, the gas, the water, the little donation to the church I'd set up after Gerald died. The rhythm of a careful life. I read down it the way I'd read 1,000 of them, and I felt the muscle of the old work come back, the eye that catches the thing that doesn't sit. And then, after the date of the signatory change, 2 payments going out that I had never made. Not bills, not standing orders, 2 single transfers, a fortnight apart, each one to the same destination, and against each one, in the reference field, a single word. Fees. The first was 3,000. The second was 5. 8,000 pounds. I read it once. I read it twice, sucking the peppermint down to nothing. The child behind me laughed again, and the bells played on, and somewhere a printer ran. Fees. There was no fee. There is no fee on this earth that my account owed to anybody. Certainly not 8,000 pounds of one. Certainly not in 2 lumps with a 1-word note that a child could see through. I knew where my money went. I had always known where my money went, even in the years I let Gerald see to it, because knowing where money goes is the one thing I have never in my life been able to switch off. And here was Gerald's old rule come round at last. Keep your own copy. Because the destination of those transfers, the sort code, and the account, I could read. And I had something at home in his hand that told me exactly what this account was and where it came from. The 94,000 of it, the life insurance, and the 40 years of putting by. A clean line all the way back. Their line had a 1-word lie at the end of it. I stood up. I folded the stack one more time and put it in my bag and pressed the clasp shut. The young man called something pleasant after me about whether I'd got everything I needed, and I believe I answered him, and I believe I walked out past the queue and the child and out the glass doors into the cold without my change from the photocopying, which I'd handed over a $5 for. I didn't go to the car. I stood on the pavement under the unlit lights and got my phone out and found Dennis, and my thumb was over his name, and I wanted to hear him say it, the lie. I wanted to hear what shape it took in his mouth. I held the phone to my ear. It started to ring. I ended the call before he answered. Not yet. Not on a pavement. Not until I had all of it. Val drove me home not saying much, which for Val is a kind of love. And when she pulled up at the house, there was a van just leaving, and on the map behind my own front door, when I let myself in, there was a second, long white envelope. This one was not from the bank. This one was about the house. The second letter was a copy of the registered power of attorney itself, sent on to me as the donor, the way the rules say it must be. Property and financial affairs. Those were the words. Not just the bank, the house, everything. I read the first line of it 3 times and could not make it stay still. Property and financial affairs. The donor being. The words slid off and I started again, and started again, and on the 3rd time I heard myself say something hard to Val, who'd only asked if I wanted the heating up. Leave the heating, Val. For God's sake, I'm trying to read. She didn't answer. She just reached over and put her hand flat on my knee for a second, then put it back on the wheel. The wipers went. The dog breathed behind us. The smell of that car, wet dog and rain, and the little tree thing she hangs off the mirror that's never once smelled of pine. We drove and I looked at the wet leaves flattened black on the pavement, and I didn't read anything else for a while. It was 4 o'clock and already going dark. I'd handled this for other people. That was the thing sitting in my chest like a stone. I had sat across a counter from sons and daughters and said, "I'm afraid your mother does need to sign this herself," and felt quietly proud of being the one who knew the rules. And here was the same machinery turned round to face me, and for the length of that drive I was no better at it than any frightened woman who'd ever sat in my chair. Val didn't take me home. She drove past the turn for Linley Road, and I noticed and said nothing, and she pulled up on Market Street outside a cafe that had its shutters down and pointed up at a lit window above it. "Now don't start," she said. "I rang her this morning while you were in the bank. I've known Priya Nair since she did my Brian's probate. She does this, the money business, with families. The nasty kind. You're going up those stairs if I have to carry you. And I can't. So you're walking." "Val, oh bloody hell, Madge!" She turned right round in her seat. "You sat in that bank looking like somebody'd hit you, and you've not said a word in 20 minutes. You're not the one who should be ashamed here. Up!" The office was warm. A radiator ticking under the window, a blind that squeaked when it moved, a proper cup and saucer set in front of me, not a mug, and I was grateful for that small dignity without quite knowing why. Below us, faint through the floor, a delivery man was whistling something cheerful as he stacked crates outside the shut cafe. Priya Nair was about my son's age, calm, unhurried, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She let me get the papers out and lay them on her desk. She turned her teaspoon over in its saucer, once, before she said anything. A small private ritual. And then she looked at it all properly. The bank letter, the statements, the power of attorney, taking her time. "All right," she said at last. "First, so you can breathe. None of this is the end of anything. I want you to hear that before we go further. Things that are done can be undone. It takes work, but they can be undone. I had not known how much I needed a person to say that until she said it. This is a lasting power of attorney for property and financial affairs, she went on, touching the page. Registered. That means on paper, your son can act on your finances. But registered is not the same as permanent, and it is very much not the same as right. You are the donor. As long as you have capacity, and Marjorie, having spoken to you for 10 minutes, I have no doubt at all that you have capacity. You can revoke this. You sign a deed of revocation, we notify the office of the public guardian, we notify him. It comes off the register. And the bank, I said. The 8,000. The bank is a separate track and a faster one. Those 2 transfers, marked as fees, she tapped them. You didn't authorize them? There's no fee, I'd know. Then that's a matter for their fraud team, and they have a duty to investigate and, where a payment was unauthorized, to reverse it. We also make a safeguarding referral, because that is what this is, financial abuse of an adult at risk. I know that's an ugly phrase to hear about your own family. It's the right phrase, and the right phrase is what gets things done. She said it so plainly that it didn't knock me down. It steadied me. I'd spent my life among the right phrases. I'd only ever had them on my side of the desk before. She picked up the power of attorney again and looked at the back of it, at the part I hadn't let myself look at properly, the certificate. The bit where someone signs to say the donor understands and isn't being pressed. Now this is interesting, she said, and there was a different note in her voice, quieter, sharper. The certificate provider here has signed and dated this. Do you see the date? I looked where her finger was. The 9th. The 9th, I said. The 9th of November. This certificate states that on that day, the certificate provider was satisfied you understood the power you were granting and were under no pressure. Among other things, that you had the mental capacity to make it. She set the teaspoon straight. Marjorie, where were you on the 9th of November? And the cold hand was back on my neck, but a different cold this time, a clean one. The 9th. I had gone in for the fall on the last day of October. The operation was the 2nd of November. The 9th was a week after they cut into my hip. The 9th was a day I could not have told you my own road, never mind understood a deed. The 9th I was on a ward with a drip in my arm. I was in hospital, I said. I was a week out of surgery. I was on morphine. I couldn't have signed for a parcel on the 9th. Never mind that. Priya did not smile exactly, but something settled in her. The look of a person who has just been handed the corner of a thing she can pull. Then understand what that means, she said. A certificate is a sworn account that something happened. If you can show you were on a hospital ward on the 9th in no state to do what this certificate says you did, then this document does not just come off the register. It becomes evidence that it should never have gone on it. That changes everything about how the bank and the public guardian and anyone else looks at your son. She paused. But you'll need the paper, a discharge summary, a dated letter, something from the hospital with that date on it that nobody can wave away. Do you think you have such a thing? I thought of the heap of post I'd come home to. The hospital letters mixed in with the get well cards. A card with a date written inside it in a friend's hand. I might, I said. Then find it, said Priya. Because before any of that, there's a choice only you can make, and I want you to think hard about it tonight. She folded her hands. Do you want to go to your son first and give him the chance to put this right himself? Or do you want to protect everything first, quietly, and speak to him only when you're standing on solid ground? The garden went white in the night and stayed white. A hard frost, the real kind, the grass stiff with it and my breath showing faintly indoors because I still hadn't bled the radiator in the kitchen and couldn't be bothered to learn how. It was December now, the first week of it. 4 days I'd sat at this table and turned it from a heap into something I understood. The table was covered. Neat stacks, each one squared off, each one with a dated page on top in my own hand. Bank statements here, the power of attorney and its certificate there, the hospital letters found at last in their own pile by the salt, and the pens lined up parallel along the top edge because I cannot think until the pens are straight. Gerald used to laugh at me for that. The branch manager who couldn't start a sentence till her biros agreed with each other. I worked the way I'd worked for 30 years. I built the timeline. And the timeline was where it turned. Because here is what I had told myself those first nights to be able to sleep at all. That my son had panicked. That he'd seen his mother go down on the kitchen floor and crack her hip and disappear into a hospital, and he'd frightened himself with thoughts of what came next, and in a stupid, blundering, frightened way, he'd reached for control, the way a frightened person grabs the wheel. Wrong, badly wrong, but human. A son's fear gone crooked. I could almost forgive a thing like that. I wanted to. A mother will build her son a staircase out of almost nothing just to climb down off the truth. The dates wouldn't let me. The first transfer, the $3,000, the one marked fees. I'd found the bank's record of when the instruction was set up, and it was set up before I came home. There was an invoice, too, in the second letters bundle, a thin, made-up-looking thing for consultancy, and its date sat there cold and clear, the 8th of November. I was on the ward on the 8th of November. You do not, in a panic, sitting up in the night, sick with worry for your mother, draw up a dated invoice for consultancy fees to yourself. That is a thing you prepare. And once I let myself see it, the rest came in behind it like cold water under a door. Carol, at this table, the week before I fell, the silver laptop open in front of her, and how she'd shut it, click, that bit too quick when I came in with the biscuits. Just doing the family admin, Marjorie. I'd had a glimpse, half a second, of the screen before the lid came down, and at the time it had meant nothing, just rows and figures. Carol was always at her figures. Now I saw it again the way you see a thing once you know what it is. Rows. A column of figures down the side, the kind of grid you make when you are adding up what a person is worth. And Dennis, that same visit, helping me carry plates through, asking it so lightly, so kindly, over his shoulder while he ran the tap. "Have you still got all Dad's old paperwork up there, Mom? Or did you finally have a clear out?" I'd said I'd kept it. I'd said Gerald never threw a receipt away in his life, and I wasn't about to start. And Dennis had said, that's good. You don't want to lose track of things," and changed the subject. He hadn't been worried I'd lost track. He'd been checking what survived, what there was still in that gray metal box that might one day stand against them. I sat with that for a long time. Outside, on the slope behind the gardens, children had found the frost and were sledging, shrieking with the pure joy of it, that high, ringing sound of children who don't know yet that anything in the world is wrong. A robin came to the bird table and cocked its head at me through the glass and went again. I want to say something to you now, whoever you are, listening to me in your kitchen or your car or wherever this finds you. Because I think there are more of us than will ever say it out loud. So many of us spend our lives afraid of one quiet thing. Not of dying. Of the day the children we raised decide between themselves in a kitchen we can't hear that we've had our turn now and start managing us. If that fear has ever sat in your chest in the dark, tell me. I'd like to know I'm not the only one who's felt it. And then let me get back to my table, because I'm not finished. I got Gerald's box, and I set it on the chair beside me, the way you'd sit a friend down. And I took the gold pin out of my pocket and put it on the table in front of me where I could see it. 30 years. They gave you a pin for 30 years. Dennis had been at the little do they threw, a teenager then, bored, eating the sandwiches. He'd watched them shake my hand. He knew exactly who I'd been, once. He had simply decided I wasn't her anymore. Val rang. She rings every evening now. Have you decided what you're doing, Madge? Because I'll tell you what I think, and then I'll shut up. She didn't shut up. Ring the boy. Have him round. Look him in the eye and give him the chance to undo it himself, before it's solicitors and fraud teams and God knows. He's your son. Whatever Carol's put in his head, give him the one chance. And if he uses the chance to move the rest before I can stop him? Down the line, Val went quiet because she knew. Priya had said the other thing, said it gently. Secure everything first. Protect the ground you stand on, and only then walk out onto it. People who get a warning shot don't reform, Marjorie. They tidy up. Two voices, mercy and sense, the mother and the manager. And for 4 days they'd pulled me back and forth across this table. That evening, I chose. I would do what Priya said. Secure it all first. The bank, the revocation, the proof of the 9th, every quiet, unglamorous step, done properly, on paper, before either of them knew the ground had moved. But I would not do it the cold way they'd expect. A letter from a solicitor landing out of nowhere, a stranger's voice on the phone. No. When it was all in place, I would have my reckoning at my own table, with my own people in the room, and I would say it to their faces. Not to punish, to be seen doing it, so that no one could ever again call me the confused old woman who didn't understand. I straightened the pens. I had a plan now, and a cold, clean calm where the grief had been. And the phone, face up on the table by the pen line, lit and buzzed and turned itself round with the force of it, and the name on the screen was Carol. I let it ring twice. Then I picked it up, and I made my voice warm and tired and a little vague, the voice of the mother they thought they had. Hello, love. Marjorie. Smooth, careful, kind as anything. How are you feeling? We've been so worried. Listen, I won't keep you. I know you tire easily now. I just wanted to say, please don't trouble yourself with all that bank paperwork that's been coming. It's confusing stuff at the best of times. Dennis has got it all in hand. You just rest and leave the worrying to us. Leave the worrying to us. Don't trouble yourself with the paperwork that's been coming. She knew what had been coming. She knew it had arrived. And not one word in all that kindness asking what the letters had said. The hold music was tinny and far away in my ear, the same 8 bars going round, and I sat at the table with the kitchen clock ticking over me and a fresh page of reference numbers in my own neat hand. I'd led the radiator at last. Val had talked me through it down the phone, and now it ticked warm against the wall, and the kitchen was a decent place to fight from. A bright recorded woman told me every little while that my call was important to them. On the table, a round of toast I'd made an hour ago sat cold and untouched. There was frost on the inside of the bedroom window that morning, ferns of it on the glass, and I'd lain looking at it before I got up, gathering myself. I knew how to do this. That was the gift in all of it, the one thing they hadn't reckoned on. I had spent 30 years on the other end of calls exactly like this one. I knew the words that move a case up a queue. I knew not to be passed along and soothed and promised a callback. I knew to say in a calm, flat voice the magic phrase. I'm reporting unauthorized transactions on my account, and I'd like this logged as a fraud case with a reference, please, today. The young woman who'd answered put me through within the minute. Fraud team, this is Stephen speaking, Stephen Okafor. Can I take the account name and a bit of detail about your concern? A good voice. Careful, unhurried. The voice of a man who's been trained to let people get to the end of a sentence. I gave him the account and the 2 transfers, the dates, the amounts, the word fees against each. And you didn't authorize either of those payments? No, I did not. And I'd not authorized the change of signatory that came before them either. That was done while I was in hospital. There's a power of attorney behind all this that I'm revoking through my solicitor, but the bank side is what I'm reporting to you now. I heard him typing. Then a small pause, the pause of a man choosing his words because the rules say there are things he can and can't tell me. Right. I'm going to be straight with you about how this works, because I can tell I don't need to dress it up for you. I'm raising this as a fraud case now. You'll have the reference before we hang up. We can place a marker on the account that stops any further outgoing payments while it's investigated. On the 2 payments you're disputing, where we find a payment was made without the account holder's authority, the bank's duty is to put you back in the position you'd have been in. That means we can reverse them. I can't promise you a day, and I can't tell you anything about the other party while it's open. But I can tell you it's moving from this minute. Thank you, I said. Read me the reference and I'll take it down. He read it. I read it back to him, twice, the way you do, and ticked it on my page, the biro pressing little channels into the paper. There's one thing we'll need from your end, he said, because of the sums and the source. We'll need to verify the origin of the funds in the account, the history of it, so the picture's clean. Sometimes that's the awkward bit for people. The records go back a long way and they've not kept much. And I smiled. He couldn't see it, but I smiled at my own cold kitchen because of a gray metal box on the chair beside me with 19 years of Gerald's careful hand in it and a folded sheet at the bottom that traced every pound of that $94,000 back to where it came from. I think, I said, you'll find I've kept rather a lot. That makes my life easier. A warmth came into the careful voice. You'd be surprised how rare it is. Honestly, the people who keep proper records, they're a dying breed. I had it drummed into me when I started, mind. First manager I ever had, in my training year, she'd have your guts if a file wasn't right. Best grounding I ever got. Whatever I know, I learned off the back of her, really. Oh yes, I said, only half attending, ticking my page. What was her name? He said the name. I put the pen down. I knew the name. I had not just known her. I had trained her, that woman, when she was a girl of 22 with a drawer of forms and too much to prove, in a branch 2 towns over, more years ago than I cared to count. I had stood over her and made her redo a file till it was right because that was how it was done. because someone had once stood over me. The man on the phone, the careful, good man who was going to take my money back off my son, had learned his trade at the elbow of a woman I had made. I had to sit down, and I was already sitting. I got the rest of it done somehow, the markers, the next steps, the address to send copies to. And when I'd hung up, I sat in the warm, ticking kitchen and thought, I will wear the pin. Next time I walk into that branch, I will have the gold pin on my coat, and I will not care a jot who thinks it sentimental. 30 years. They forgot. He hadn't. The phone went almost at once. Dennis. I let it ring out. It rang again. The third time I lifted it but didn't speak. Mom? Mom, are you there? My card's just been declined at the petrol station. The joint, the one for the account. And I don't... Has something happened with the bank? Has somebody been ringing them? Mom? The smoothness was gone clean out of him. No, honestly, no one sang. Just a man tripping over himself, the same half sentences again and again. Because if there's been some confusion, we can sort it. We can just sort it between us. There's no need for... we don't need anyone else, anyone official. I listened to him be afraid. And the ache of it was real. I won't pretend it wasn't. That was my boy. Frightened. And a mother's body answers that whether she wills it or no. But I had sat 4 days at this table and made myself learn the difference. He was not afraid for me. There was not one word in all that stumbling about how I was, whether I was eating, was the hip mending. He was afraid of the declined card, afraid of anyone official, afraid for himself. I let him run down into silence, and I did not say a word, and after a moment, the voicemail cut him off. The wardrobe stood open, and Gerald's box was on the bed, and the discharge letter was cool in my hand, and it was late, gone 11, the window black, and the floorboards cold under my feet. And that was when it finally got through to me. Not at the kitchen table with the pen straight and the work to do. Here, in the dark, with nothing left to organize. My son did this. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Through the wall, next door, were having people in, a party, the bass of something coming through faint and steady, and a burst of muffled laughter every now and then, a woman's laugh rising over the top of it. And on my side of the wall, I sat in the cold, with a metal box and a photograph, and let myself know the thing I'd been too busy to know. I had one child. One. Gerald and I had wanted more and weren't given more, and so everything I had went into the one, the way a whole sky of rain will go down a single drain. And the one had sat with his wife and added me up on a spreadsheet and waited for me to fall. I picked up Gerald's photograph from the chest of drawers. The frame was cool and glassy under my thumb. It was a summer one, a long-gone summer, him squinting into the sun on a beach somewhere with his trousers rolled, laughing at me holding the camera. A young man still, hair the wind had got at. 4 years gone. And I said to him, out loud, because there was no one to hear it but the party through the wall, "You said keep my own copy. You never said I'd need it against our boy." And I heard him answer, the way you hear the dead when you've loved them long enough. Not comfort. Gerald was never one for comfort. Just the old, dry truth. You can read a document 100 times, Marjorie. You only understand it the day it's about you. I'd thought, all those years ago, it was a saying about being careful, a banker's dry little rule. I understood it now in my body, the whole weight of it. I had read 10,000 of these. I had explained capacity to other people's children across a counter and gone home and forgotten it by tea time. And now there was one document in the world that was about me. And I understood it at last, and understanding it was the loneliest thing that had ever happened to me. I let myself sit in that a while. The bass through the wall, the laughter, the black window. I think you have to. I think if you don't sit in the grief of a thing when it comes for you, it waits and takes you down later, at a worse time. So I sat, and I grieved the son I'd thought I had, the boy bored at my 30 years due eating the sandwiches, and I let him go. And then, because I am who I am, I went back to the box. The discharge letter first. I smoothed it on the bedspread and squared it to the edge of Gerald's photo frame, the way I square everything, and I read the dates again, slow. Admitted the 31st of October. Surgery the 2nd of November. And down in the body of it, the daily notes the ward had sent on. Post-operative, the medication, the dosages, the line that said the patient remained drowsy and disoriented in the days following surgery, and a date against it. The 9th of November. The very day. The date on that certificate. The day a man had signed to swear that I, Marjorie Ellison, sat up clear-eyed and sound of mind and freely understood that I was handing my son power over my house and my money. And here, in black and white, on hospital paper no one could wave away, was where I'd really been on the 9th. On a ward, drowsy, disoriented. A week out of having my hip rebuilt with morphine in me. I put it down. My hands were quite steady. I found the get well card from the church ladies, the one with the silly, glittery foil border, and there inside, in Margaret Pugh's looping hand, was the date she'd visited me on the ward, and the line, "You were sleeping when we came, pet, so we left the flowers. Get well soon." Dated the 9th. The flowers I had no memory of at all. 2 pieces of paper. A certificate that said one thing, and a hospital that said the truth. Then the folded sheet from the bottom of the box. Gerald's hand. The thing I'd forgotten for 19 years. The letter from the insurer when his policy was first set up, and clipped to it, in his careful pencil, the record of every payment into the savings account since, year on year, the slow, honest building of it. The bank had asked me to prove where the $94,000 came from. Here it was, clean as a whistle all the way back. Their $8,000 had a one-word lie at the end of it, fees, and my whole account had Gerald's pencil at the start of it, true to the penny. The 2 halves came together on the bedspread under the lamp, the proof of where I was and the proof of what was mine. And the thing was whole. They had built their house on a date, and the date was a lie I could prove with hospital paper. I sat a moment longer. Then I got up, cold-footed, and I went and took the gold pin out of its china dish on the windowsill, where it had sat gathering dust since the day we buried Gerald. I carried it back to the bedroom. My good navy coat was on its hanger, and I took it down and laid it over the chair, ready, and I pinned the pin to the collar, working the little clasp with fingers that ached in the cold, and I set it straight. 30 years. They forgot. I had not. It was nearly midnight, and I did a thing you don't do to a solicitor, and rang her anyway, because Priya had said, "Ring me any time something changes," and everything had changed. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep, and went sharp and clear the moment she heard mine. "Marjorie, what's happened?" "Nothing's happened," I said. "Everything's ready, that's all. I've the proof of the 9th, hospital notes, a dated card, the lot. And I've the source of the funds, every pound of it, in my late husband's own hand. The bank can have whatever they want." Marjorie, that's everything. We can move now. I'll have the revocation drawn up and Priya. I looked at the coat on the chair, the small gold catch of light at its collar. "I want it done a particular way. Secure it all first, exactly as you said. The bank, the revocation, all of it quiet. And when it's done, when there's solid ground under me, I want to say it to their faces. Not a letter out of nowhere. At my own table. With Val there, and with you if you'll come. Before Christmas, I want my son to hear the truth from me, in front of people, in the house he grew up in." There was a silence down the line. Then Priya, wide awake now, said quietly, "You understand that's the hardest way to do it." "I ran a bank for 30 years, love," I said. "I've never once done a hard thing the easy way. It's too late to start." Sleet ticked against Priya's window, turning to wet snow as I watched. And across the street, the shop had its tree lit in the window, colored bulbs blurred behind the running glass. The proper cup and saucer were in front of me again. 2 folders sat squared on the desk between us, and Priya had her hand flat on the top one. "The bank's come back," she said. "Stephen's people. I want to take you through it slowly because there's a thing in here you'll need a moment with." "Take me through it." She opened the first folder. "The 2 payments, the 8,000. They traced where it went, which they're allowed to share with you now the case is made. It went to an account. The account belongs to your son and his wife. The fees were a fiction. There was no service, no consultancy, nothing. It was your money moved into their account with a word typed in a box to make the line look respectable." I'd known it. Hearing it said plainly in a warm office with snow on the glass was still a particular weight. I nodded for her to go on. "And here's the thing." She drew the second folder over and opened it. Her chair squeaked as she leaned. "When the bank looked at the timing, and when I pulled the supporting documents to the power of attorney, 2 things carry the same fingerprints. The invoice, the made-up consultancy invoice, and a second document, an inventory." An inventory. A schedule of assets. Your house, valued. Your savings, to the pound. Your premium bonds. Your car, the lot. Set out in a spreadsheet, line by line, with a column for current value and a column headed, and I'm reading it to you exactly, projected. She looked up at me. "It's a plan, Marjorie. A plan for what to do with everything you own. And it's dated." "When?" My voice came out level. A peer's voice, across a desk, asking the date on a file. Not a victim's. 3 weeks before you fell." The sleet ticked. Down in the street, a busker had started up a carol, badly, the notes sliding flat off the tune, cheerful and awful. 3 weeks before I fell. Before the hip, before the hospital, before any frightened son could tell himself he was reaching for the wheel in a panic. 3 weeks before there was anything to panic about, someone had sat down and set out my whole life in a grid with a column marked projected. "It's Carol's," I said. It was not a question. I can't put it in those words in a legal document, and neither should you, out loud, to anyone but me. Priya said it gently, but she said it firmly. What I can tell you is what the documents show. The spreadsheet was made in a particular program by a particular login, and the metadata, the hidden record of who made a file and when, names her account. The bookkeeping style is consistent throughout. The invoice that dressed up the theft was built by the same hand. Your son's name is on the power of attorney. His name is on the bank account the money went to. But the architecture of this, the thinking, the dates, the careful structure of it, that came from somewhere methodical. I thought of the silver laptop closing, click, that bit too quick. Just doing the family admin, Marjorie. She had been. She'd been doing it at my own table over my own biscuits with me pouring the tea. And I understood, sitting there, the shape of the whole thing at last. Dennis had folded the moment a card was declined. He'd rung me, stammering, half sentences, no plan, no nerve. That was not the conduct of a man who builds a scheme. That was a man who's been handed one and told his lines. He was the face of it, the name on the forms, the soothing phone voice, the son who'd be believed. The thinking had never been his. He'd married a woman who looked at his mother and saw a column headed projected, and somewhere across 4 years of polite Sunday lunches, she'd talked him round to it, and he'd let her. Because being the man who managed his mother's money let him feel, for once in his life, like someone who'd made it. That was the grief of it, and I let it touch me for just a moment. Not grief for Dennis alone now. Grief for the whole of it, for the family that had been, that this would end. There was no version of the next fortnight where we all sat down to a Sunday lunch again. I was burying something in that office, with the snow coming down, and I knew it. I left the bitter coffee they'd brought me untouched and went cold. "Stephen confirmed the rest," Priya said, watching me, kind enough to move me past it. "The markers on the account, no more goes out. The 2 payments, the $8,000, are being reversed back to you. The signatory change is voided, and the revocation of the power of attorney is drawn and ready for your signature. Once you sign, we notify the public guardian, it comes off the register, and your son has no authority over anything of yours, on paper or off it. He's removed, completely. From the account, the documents, the standing payments, all of it." "Removed," I said. I turned the word over. It was a good word, cleaner than punished. Not arrested. "That's a conversation for later, and it's yours to have, not mine. Right now, removed is what the documents do." "Then that's what I want. Removed." I looked at the snow. "I don't want him in a cell, Priya. I've thought about it in the night, God knows. But there's a granddaughter, Sophie, 19, away at university, knows nothing of any of this, and none of it is hers to carry. I'll not have her grow up the girl whose father was put away by his own mother. He'll be out of my affairs and out of my trust. That's the price." "That's enough." Priya was quiet a moment. Then she squared the 2 folders edge to edge, a small, precise movement, and slid them across the desk to me. "How do you want to do it?" "At my table. 2 days before Christmas. Dennis and Carol both. I'll ask them round to talk about the bank, and they'll come thinking I'm confused and they're coming to manage me. You there, and Val. We lay it out. Quietly. No shouting, no names called I can't stand behind. Just the documents, on the table, one after another, the way you've laid them for me. And then I tell them what's been done, that it's all undone, and they're out of it." I paused. "Not Sophie. Sophie stays away from it. She's not to be in that room. You understand, Priya said. That's the hardest way. A letter from me would spare you the whole scene. You'd never have to look at their faces. I've been getting ready for this for 40 years, I said. Since the night a careful man at a kitchen table told me to keep my own copy of everything. I just didn't know it was this I was getting ready for. I'll look at their faces. I've earned that. The kitchen was warm and clean and smelled of the cake I'd baked that afternoon. A plain Madeira, because my hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. The table was cleared and wiped, 4 cups set out, the pot ready. On the back of the 4th chair hung my good navy coat, and on its collar the little gold pin caught the lamp every time I moved past it. Outside it was dark by 3:30 now, and the neighbor's hedge across the way was strung with fairy lights, winking blue and gold through my window. 2 days before Christmas, 2025. Priya sat at one side, a slim folder in front of her, in a good suit, looking exactly like what she was. Val sat by the window with her arms folded and her mouth set. We'd said little. There was nothing left to plan. They came at 6. I heard Dennis's car, then the 2 of them on the path, and Carol's voice low saying something, and Dennis's answering, and then the knock. I opened the door myself, on my own 2 feet, no stick that they could see, and let them in. Mom. Dennis kissed my cheek. He smelled of the cold. You look well. Doesn't she look well? His eyes went past me to the kitchen and found Priya, and the smile faltered. Oh, you've company. This is Priya Nair, my solicitor. I watched it land. And you know your Auntie Val. Come and sit down, both of you. There's tea. They sat because there is nothing else you can do when an old woman says sit down and there's tea. Carol arranged herself neatly, handbag on her knee, composed, that careful, kind face she's worn at my table for 20 years. Dennis sat and didn't know what to do with his hands. We thought, Carol began, warm, gentle. We'd have a little talk about the bank, Marjorie. Just the family. There's no need for... I poured 4 cups, I said, so let's have our tea. I poured them. Nobody touched a cup. I sat down at the head of my own table, and I put my hand flat on the first piece of paper, and I began. On the 2nd of November, I had my hip operated on. You both know that. While I was on the ward, a change was made to my savings account, a second name added. Mine had stood alone on it for 40 years. I slid the bank letter to the middle of the table. That's the confirmation. You'll have seen it. Dennis took my post off the mat to deal with, so you'll have seen it before I did. Mom, that was only... Let me finish, love. You'll have your turn. I laid the next sheet down. A lasting power of attorney, property and financial affairs, registered, giving you, Dennis, authority over my money and my house. There's the certificate on the back. A man has signed it to swear that on the 9th of November, I sat up clear-headed and understood every word of what I was signing away, and that no one had pressed me to it. I put the hospital discharge letter beside it, then the church lady's card with its silly glitter border. On the 9th of November, I said, I was on a ward, a week out of surgery, drowsy and disoriented on morphine. It's in the nurse's own notes, there. And Margaret Pugh came to visit me that day, and I was asleep, so she left the flowers and wrote it in this card. The 9th. I have no memory of the flowers at all. I let that sit. So either I got up off that ward and went and understood a deed and came back, or that certificate swears to a thing that never happened. Dennis had gone the color of the tablecloth. We were only trying to help, Mum. The old line. It came out small. You weren't well. We didn't know what would happen. We just wanted to be able to look after things for you. That's all it ever... 2 payments left that account after the signatory changed, I said, and laid them down, the 2 of them, side by side. 3,000, then 5. Marked fees. There was no fee. The bank traced where the money went. I looked at him. It went into your account, yours and Carol's. 8,000 pounds of mine, with a made-up word typed in a box to make the line look tidy. The fairy lights winked through the window. Somewhere down the road a door opened, and a snatch of music came out and was shut off again. That's the bank's finding, not mine, I went on. I reported it. I know how, you see. I sat on the other side of that work for 30 years. The young man on the fraud team, lovely fellow, turns out he was trained by a girl I trained myself a lifetime ago. The bank remembered me, Dennis, even after you decided I was finished. My voice didn't rise. I wouldn't let it. The 8,000's been reversed. It's back. The account's frozen to anything going out, and the power of attorney is being struck off the register, so by the new year, you'll have no more standing over my affairs than the postman does. He was breaking now. I could see it. The way the rehearsed words ran out, and there was nothing underneath them but a frightened man. Mum, please, it wasn't. It didn't start out as... We just got into difficulty, and Sophie's fees and the business, and I didn't know what to... It wasn't meant to be. I laid down the last sheet. This was made 3 weeks before I fell, I said quietly. Before there was anything to help me with. It's a list of everything I own. The house, valued. The savings, to the pound. There's a column at the side. It's headed, projected. Dennis stared at it. And then he did the thing that told the whole room everything. He turned his head and he looked at Carol. Not at me, at his wife. The look of a man waiting to be told what to say. Carol didn't blink. She set her composed face against all of us, and she said, in that level, pleasant voice, I don't see that an old woman who falls over in her own kitchen is in any position to be managing 300,000 pounds. Somebody sensible was always going to have to step in. We simply did it sooner. The clock ticked. Val, by the window, said one thing, flat as a gate shedding. There it is. That was all. There it is. And it was. Carol had told the truth at last, the only true thing she'd said in 20 years, and she'd told it in front of a solicitor and a witness, and her own husband had heard the shape of what he'd married. I stood up. The pin caught the lamp. I ran a bank, Carol, I said, for 30 years. I read documents exactly like these every working day of my life, and signed off ones that mattered a great deal more. You sat at this table and decided the woman pouring your tea was finished. You were wrong about the one thing you needed to be right about. Silence. The proper kind, that no one rushes to fill. There was a clatter of feet on the path then, and the bell, and high, bright voices starting up Hark the Herald under my window, carol singers, children from the close, beaming and oblivious. Val got up without a word and went and saw to them, pressed a coin in a tin, sent them off down the path still singing, and shut the door on the cold. I picked up the single sheet I'd kept by my cup. I walked round the table and I put it down in front of Dennis. A plain printed page. The bank's confirmation that he had been removed as signatory, that every standing arrangement of mine in his name was canceled, that he held no authority over anything of mine. A receipt for his removal. "You're out of it," I said. "All of it. The account, the deeds, the lot. I'm not going to the police. Not for my sake, you understand me? For Sophie's. She's done nothing, and she'll not grow up the girl whose grandmother put her father away. So you'll keep your liberty, and you'll lose me. And that's the bargain, and it's more than fair." I looked at the two of them. "Now finish your tea or don't, but then you'll go. It's late, and I've a cake half-eaten and no one to share it with, which is your doing, not mine." They went. Carol first, upright, that handbag on her arm, not a word. Dennis at the door turned back, and for a second he was 8 years old, and I very nearly. But I held the frame and I held my face, and I said only, "Drive safe, the roads'll be icy," and shut the door. I stood in the hall a moment. Then I went back in and sat down at my cleared table with Val, who reached over and took my hand and held it hard, the way she does, and neither of us said anything for a good while. I took the navy coat off the chair back. I didn't put it away. I hung it on the hook by the door where I'd see it, the gold pin still on the collar, and left it there. The cake sat between us. Val cut 2 slices we didn't much want, and we ate them anyway. My phone lit on the table and turned itself with the buzz. I picked it up. A message from Sophie. My granddaughter, away at her university, who knew nothing of any of this, nothing of her mother's grid with its column marked projected, nothing of the cups going cold on my table tonight, just, "Hi, Gran. Mom said you've not been well. Are you okay? Thinking of you. XX." It's the autumn of 2026 now, and I'm 74. There was a frost again this morning, the first of the year, white along the same porch rail, and I stood at the window with my tea and watched it go silver in the early light, and I thought, as I do most mornings, that another year had turned, and I was still here and still myself. That second part used to go without saying. It doesn't anymore. I say it on purpose now. I went into town on Tuesday to see about moving some money into a better account, an ordinary errand, the sort I'd have done in my sleep once. Val drove me, the same old estate car, the same dog, the same crack in the wing mirror she's never going to fix. She waited outside with a flask, grumbling about the parking, and I went in on my own. I had the navy coat on, the gold pin on the collar. The young man on the desk wasn't there, but Stephen was, the one from the fraud team, in to cover something or other, and he saw me come in, and he came round the counter to say hello. He'd never met me face to face, only the voice on the phone a year ago, but he knew me at once, and he shook my hand with both of his. "You'll be the lady who kept all her records," he said, smiling. "We still talk about you, you know. Set the bar." I told him his old training manager had set it first, and that I'd set hers, and we worked out between us the long thread of it, the chain of women keeping files right, going back and back, and he laughed and said it was a small world. And it is. I sorted my money out and I left, and the whole way to the car I had the pin catching the light on my collar, and I didn't care a button who thought an old woman foolish for wearing a thing she earned. 30 years. It had sat in a dish gathering dust the whole of my widowhood, the badge of a woman I'd half believed was behind me. It lives on my coat now. I put it away once, like myself. I've taken us both back out. As for Dennis and Carol, these things go the way they go. The money I'd been the wall around was the thing holding a great deal else up, and once it was gone, the rest came down in its own time, the way a thing does when it was never built true. The marriage strained, then strained past bearing. I heard, the way you hear, that they're apart now or near it. I take no joy in it. I'd have spared them all of it if they'd only let me keep being who I was. Dennis did this to himself with his own 2 hands, guided by hers, and a man who does that is diminished by it, whether anyone punishes him or not. There's the justice, if you want it. Not a cell. Just the slow, plain truth of what a choice costs. The ache of him I carry, and I'll carry it to the end. My one child. You don't put that down. But I carry it standing up, not on my knees, and there's a difference, and the difference is everything. I left a door open, mind, a narrow one. I wrote to him in the summer, not to forgive, not yet, perhaps not for a long while, just to say that if he ever wanted to sit at my table again as my son, and not as a man with a plan, the chair was there, and he'd come to it on my terms or not at all. He hasn't yet. He may. The door's open the width I chose, and not an inch more, and choosing the width of it myself is its own kind of peace. Sophie comes now. That's the bright thing, the thing I didn't dare hope for. She reached out that night with her little message asking was I all right, and I let her in, slowly, carefully, on her own and quite apart from her parents' trouble, which I've kept from her as best I can and always will. She's 20 now, full of opinions, home from her university at the weekends sometimes, and she sat in my kitchen last month while I showed her how to set up her first proper savings, and watched me line my pens up straight before I'd start, and laughed at me for it. Gran, you don't need them straight to do sums. I do, as it happens, I said, and lined them up anyway, and showed her how to read a statement so no one could ever pull anything over her, not ever. And she rolled her eyes and let me. And when she went to leave without her scarf, the good warm one, I put it round her neck myself at the door and tucked it in, and she said, Gran, honestly. And I said, we're only trying to help. We, her granddad and me. I still say we after 5 years. And this time the words meant exactly what they said, and she knew it. And that, in the end, is the whole of the difference between his mouth and mine. It's a quiet life now, mine. I'm grateful for it. I light a candle on a Sunday and I think of Gerald, and I keep my own copy of everything, and I am nobody's project, and I never will be again. I'll tell you what I know now that I didn't a year ago, not really. The people you raise can forget who you are. They can look at the gray in your hair and the stick in your hand and decide, between themselves, that the woman you were has gone somewhere and left only someone to be managed. They can be wrong, they very often are, but here is the thing no letter and no document and no clever solicitor can do for you. You have to remember who you are first, before anyone else will. The remembering is yours to do, and it's the first brick of the wall, and they can't lay it for you. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have known you best, I'd love to hear your story. Tell me where in the world you're listening from, and your name, or your age if you'll share it. Tell me where this one reached you. I read every single comment, every one, and I'll be here.